What's up, everybody? This is Paul Cristiano Evangelista from the Articulated channel, together with
Monica Bajansila, and you're listening to the Art Podcast.
the show where critics
And opinions about art.
will be cultivated.
Tonight, guys, we're talking about the fourth discipline of art, which is psychology. As we sit down with these art experts and painters during this podcast, they will discuss their ideas, views, and considerations so the rest can relate to it.
That's right. We'll try to discuss everything there is to know about psychology for this last episode of Discipline of Arts. At the end of this podcast, we'll gather certain information about it that will surely nourish our knowledge, especially for the people who loves art. As we may know, articulants, art and psychology have something in common, but for the interest of all the viewers, what is the relationship between art and psychology? What's your view on that, Monica?
Well, for me, to understand their relationship, let's tackle them individually. So, we know art is a significant tool for developing creativity and establishing inner inventive powers. And if properly reinforced, it may help people tackle various mental difficulties. On the other hand, psychology is a branch of science that examines human behavior such as fears, motivation, sadness, and mental and psychological illness. In my perspective, art can be used as a tool to express one's needs and communicate emotions by increasing self-esteem.
I'd like to agree with your views. So, that means the relation between psychology and art is seen in the perception and significance it offers to everyday events and occurrences. This imparting meaning into art may be seen in the production of masterpieces, and it can also be seen unintentionally in an individual's personality in the psychology. For example, we can have an idea of one's personality by looking at his or her masterpieces.
Exactly. This discipline's purpose, however, is not only practical but also theoretical. This field aims to develop theories of both creative and perceptual activity. As tackled along articulants, we can instill more into our minds the discipline of psychology in arts.
That is why we are grateful that we have invited one of the popular contemporary artists here in the Philippines. Her work seemingly attract the eyes of the people. Love at first sight doesn't only apply to people because when you see her masterpieces, you will surely fall in love with the strokes, lines, and other elements she utilized with the utmost talent.
Oh yes, not only the elements, but most importantly, the messages it brings to the viewers as it tries to communicate with the heart of people by gradually but firmly establishing thoughts that most people can relate to. Articulants, please welcome on our podcast, Miss Maria Patricia de la Rosa.
Hey everybody! Thank you so much for having me here in your podcast. Actually, I'm looking to be one of those individual artists who will become the guest and feature my arts to all the listeners. And now that I'm here, I am truly grateful.
Same goes for us, Miss Pat. First of all, thank you for accepting our invitation to you as we'd like to know more of your works and to you also as a painter, which we have observed that most of your masterpiece is inclined into giving an attractive messages to the viewers that actually fits in our topic for today.
That's right. Miss Patricia, before anything else, when did you start painting and creating this wonderful masterpiece of yours? Are you a self-taught painter?
I started painting when I was 7 years old. I remember my parents giving me a crayon and a piece of notebook where I started doing some basic arts of mine. And as I aged along, my interest in painting grew too. In fact, I'm taking fine arts now so that I can incline more my talent in painting. My interests have turned into passion as I feel complete when I'm doing my artworks.
That's wonderful. Now, coming to the present, Miss Pat, what painting of yours makes you popular today as a contemporary artist, and can you tell something about it?
I think the painting that made me famous was my artwork called The Whisper. The painting has two faces on it. As you can see, it seems like the other one is whispering something to the other one. If you are someone who likes to criticize someone's work, you will realize that whatever the other face is whispering stays in the mind on the other, and it also coming out from his mouth. My painting expresses the idea that if someone else is controlling your thoughts and beliefs, you may adopt those same views and beliefs yourself. In addition, any ideas this individual plants in your head will affect the way you communicate, including the words you pick to use.
Wow! The art itself has a powerful message to the readers, and especially the emotion it delivers to its audience is very relatable. Especially this day where mental health and any psychological disorders are being neglected by many.
Yes, I agree. The art itself speaks for its meaning. Actually, I have seen this art of Miss Pat. As soon as I have seen it, it feels like it communicates emotion through wisdom. For the last question, Miss Pat, what are your thoughts about psychology as a discipline of arts?
I believe that psychology of discipline arts gives us a sense of how we see and characterize an art form. Art appreciation and the artist's abilities to show his or her emotions can also be linked to how people interpret an artwork.
Alright, so Miss Patricia, thank you again for sharing your masterpiece and especially your thoughts as we become enlightened and have a clear sense of psychology as discipline of art. And now, for further understanding of the topic for today's podcast, we have invited also 3 artist experts who will share their views on the discipline of art, specifically psychology.
For the first guest, guys, she is known for her beautiful and aesthetically pleasing masterpiece, especially in abstract expressionism, and her works are fond of messages which most people have today relate to. Please welcome Miss Kalinga.
Hello everyone, and especially to the listeners of the podcast. Thank you for having me here.
I'm sure listeners are glad and excited for this part since our next guest, guys, she is known not just because of her works, but her critics about the works of others. She graduated and is now a professor of fine arts. Her works are known for the way it instills messages and, of course, powerful and deep meaning to the audience. Please welcome on our podcast, Miss Ibanez.
Hello guys, thank you for inviting me here. I'm beyond grateful to share my views and opinions with you.
Same goes for us, Miss Ibanez. Thank you too for becoming our guest for today's podcast. Meanwhile, our last guest is known for his abstract painting. Also, he does not deal with a representational interpretation of the subject, but his abstract let his audiences define his art. Please welcome Mr. Francisco.
What's up everybody? Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity of sharing my thought with co-artists and especially with the people who loves art.
Thank you again for all the guests who are with us for today's critic segment. We have invited you here for us and other listeners to have a firm knowledge of psychology and art. And now that we're talking about that, can you share with us your views regarding psychology as a discipline of art? Let's first ask Miss Kalinga.
Psychology, in my perception, is an artistic discipline that involves a psychological standpoint, understanding, interpretation, and artistic appreciation. Since the word itself is psychological, it means that the artist has a different meaning for a different people, attributed to a psychological impact. Additionally, it may concretely embody the artist's emotion, and an audience interpret the artwork in a variety of ways. I think that in a psychology as a discipline of arts, to be an artist is to provide multiple interpretations of an artwork. Besides, an artist's inspiration are fueled by his or her experiences, perceptions, and perspective of the world.
I highly agree with that, Miss Kalinga is pointing out. How about you, Miss Ibanez? What's your insight about it?
In addition to what Ms. Kalingal is saying, my perception of psychology as a discipline of art is a product of aesthetics and perception along with the personal experience of the artist. And it's the studies of characteristics, cognitions, and the human mental processing of art that enable painting and artworks to communicate and connect to the viewers that have a mesmerizing way of leaving an impression of emotion. Alright, how about Mr. Francisco? What are your views and ideas about it?
Psychology and arts are closely linked because of the thought and experience of people. You can read the people's mind in both psychology and art. Also, you can reduce stress, depression, and anxiety by expressing yourself through art.
Thank you for your all meaningful views and insight into psychology as the discipline of art. And as you may already know, in this early part of this podcast, we have invited a famous artist and she presented to us her well-known work. Now, go to Miss Kalingal. What's your thought about the artwork being presented and how did psychologically relates to it?
My thought about the artwork presented is it full of emotion based on the colors, shapes, and textures that were used, and people could interpret it in different ways. The first object that catches my attention is another face behind her, which I think symbolizes her mind or her inner self, which greatly affects her way of showing herself. It's more likely that what comes out of her mouth is determined by what goes into your mind. Our mind is very powerful and it will greatly affect what words come out of our tongue. So maybe this art wants us to realize that our mind is a very powerful engine that could affect us. So we must always remember to always open our minds before our mouths. When it comes to the characteristics that this art has, I could say that it consists of different meaningful colors to convey emotions, such as the color black. The painter's feelings is harmonious and there is a good chemistry in his mind. The color red, which represents strength, also the color orange, which symbolizes radiance, and the purple, which demonstrates magic and mystery. In relation to psychology, it's clear that it is not just a simple art. Instead, it is an art with a deep meaning and full of emotions. This art reminds us that beauty is not in the eye of the beholder, but must be conceived by the spectator through the inner self of the painter, which is very visible in this art, that it embodies the artist's emotion while doing the art.
Thank you for your detailed critique, Ms. Kalingal. As we know, the use of psychology in art may be evident in the elements that the painter employs and the property or association of forms. Now, moving on to Ms. Ibanez, how do you criticize the art based on the elements that the painter utilizes? Does the discipline of psychology apply to the art or not? If I had to criticize Ms. De La Rosa's well-known painting entitled The Whisper, based on the elements she uses, as a viewer, the color of the artwork has a significant impact on my emotions and perspective. The warm colors combined with a modest amount of cooler colors give the piece an anxious feeling. The dark color that fades away gives off a sense of fear and despair. Also, I think the mix of dark colors in the head coming up from the mouth of the person symbolize secrets that bring out a feeling of mystery, invoking a sense of curiosity in the viewer of the painting. In addition, the color chosen create a dramatic scene in the painting. The combination of black, red, green draws attention and flows over the artwork, directing my focus to what is going on in the painting, in which the girl's head imitates, full of secrets, problem, trauma, and anxiety, and the soul whisper to her, come out and bring out all of his mystery in life to be able to move forward and be a better new version of herself without thinking about any problems in life. Also, yes, the discipline of psychology is too visible in the painting, which reflect the artist's emotions, knowledge, and experience that gives inspiration and motivation to create this beautiful and meaningful painting, which allows for multiple interpretation and widens the viewer's imagination. Also, the artist's painting tells a story that brings an emotional reaction in the viewers. Furthermore, the artist's choices of lines, color, shape, texture, and composition are the most effective way of expressing pure emotion and conveying personal experience.
Thank you for that rich insight, Ms. Ibanez. As we know that the resemblance of psychology in the art can be seen through the elements that a painter is being utilized. Now, moving on to Mr. Francisco, what are your insight and final thought about the art? Did you notice the essence of psychology in the art being illustrated?
My thought about this art that is very beautiful. It's look like Asian art in stone. Then the color is balanced with light and dark, and you can recognize what the color wants to convey. Yes, I did notice the essence of psychology of art in this painting. Because there's a whispering soul, it seems that a person's mind is further disturbed or someone is ordering him, her, for her problem. Also, when looking at the painting, the texture is scratchy and feels raw, reflecting like unevenly creative accuracy and its rustic style. And as a viewer, I saw the painting as more dynamic, emotionally active, and creative. Moreover, the artist used positive space in the figure and negative space in the ground. Gives the composition of balance and unity that is necessary for a good and pleasing design in the painting. In addition, overall, painting gives negative emotion and experience of the artist that speaks sadness, sorrow, and loneliness.
Thank you for all your views and opinions, our dear guest. We appreciated your efforts and gradually pointing to us a clear vision regarding the discipline of psychology. Once again, thank you for coming here to our podcast.
Yes. Thank you again to our guests as we are now heading to the last segment of this podcast. Today, we have understood that the art psychology is a broad discipline that discusses perception, comprehension, art traits, and its products. The psychology of art is split into structural psychology and environmental psychology. The former relates to mental traits at the time of an art of creation or communication with the artwork.
That's true. One thing that I quoted during our podcast is that psychology as an art discipline is an outcome of aesthetics and perception, as well as the artist's personal experience. This means that the behavior of one's artist or idea of personality can be greatly seen through his art. As our guests specifically point out the elements that have been communicating a message of emotions by means of art, artists utilized relatable and applicable elements in their art, which I think is the most important factor in considering psychology as a discipline of art.
That's very true. We know that by art, we can express our emotion and communicate it to others. The psychology of disciplinary arts reveals how we perceive and describe an art form. Through the capacity of the artist to express his or her feelings may also be connected to how others understand an artwork. It's the interceding relationship between psychologists and art is in the perception and sense it gives to everyday happenings and phenomena.
Yes, and as we had seen on the art being presented by our guest artist entitled The Whisper, it highlights the mental behavior of having thoughts controlled by someone by means of property and associations of forms and elements to imply a strong emotion and feelings to the artist. As the elements should be applicable to the intention of the painter so that it can give a value to human concepts, on just only to appreciate its art forms, but most importantly to have a relation within the art.
Thank you again for all the guests and live listeners that still tunes in at this moment. We're all glad to invite you again for every Thursday night for more art talks.
Alright, once again, I am Monica Bachansila.
And I'm Paul Christian Evangelista from the Articulated channel,
And you're listening to the Art Podcast.
the show where critics
And opinions about art
will be cultivated. Thank you and good night.